Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Come on in. Come on in. I'm going to go ahead and get us set up for class this morning. In case you don't know, this is Monday in the morning. We do this every morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, and our goal is to economically elevate. Every day we talk about things. We do what I call conversational learning, where we learn about wealth by just talking about it and storytelling, just talking about things that are happening in the world because the world is a big old classroom. And I want to say good morning to everybody. And let's see who's here. I see lovely JR. Good to see you. Errol Semingal, Ann Hall, Darnell. Good to see you. Artari, Dolores Lee. Good to see everybody this morning. All right. So what I'm going to also do is I'm going to send out a quick text message to everybody who is invited to the class. And you can get on the text list by texting the word morning to 87948. Text morning to 87948. And just as a FYI, you're going to get a text message from me in a couple seconds because I like to kind of give everybody a little bit of jolt, a little boost, a little coffee. And I got up this morning. I talked to my wife. My wife's a therapist. So if you ever want to have interesting conversations in life, just go marry a therapist because they'll, if something isn't wrong, they'll find something that's wrong. And because mental health is a big issue in our society. And there's one guy that I admire a lot who has talked extensively about his mental health struggles, and his name is Deion Sanders, aka Coach Prime. Now, Coach Prime is a guy that I have admired a long time. In case y'all don't know, I have one jersey on my wall, one jersey in my office on my wall, and it's a jersey with Coach Prime, and for when he played for the Dallas Cowboys. Because number one, I think that I believe he is one of the top two or three greatest players of all time, and sorry, I'm sending out the text right now. He's one of the top two or three players of all time, in my opinion. And also, I've always loved the Cowboys. I used to get in fights with my friends. I used to get in fights with my friends over the Cowboys versus the Steelers and all those little rivalries and silly stuff like that. That's how serious I was. Just love the Cowboys. I wanted to play for them one day. Didn't quite work out though. But anyway, with that said, that sort of interest has really driven me to follow Coach Prime. I followed him for a while. I followed his journey when he was at Jackson State. I have to admit, I was super happy when he went to Jackson State. I was super upset when he left. I get it. There's money, but I think I get a little bit tired of this like consistent narrative where where the racist white people keep popping in and they just find whatever black people have that's valuable and find anything that you can build institutions from, anything that you can build generational wealth from, and they just kind of buy it or take it or whatever or burn it down. One of those three things: we're either gonna buy it, we're gonna take it, or we're just gonna burn it to the ground. But anyway, by the way, somebody said they can't hear me. Give me a quick yes. Let's do a quick audio check. Give me a yes if you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me okay. El Haj, Deborah, thank you. Rhonda, Bagby, I see you. K James, Angela Taylor, Clarence, Tara. Yeah, okay. So the person who said they couldn't hear me, I don't know. Maybe you have to check your audio. But then again, though, maybe that's kind of a weird thing for me to say because you can't hear me. But maybe you can text them and tell them if you're inside the Zoom, you could text them and tell them to check their sound on their machine. So anyway, with that said, though, I was thinking about Coach Prime. How many of y'all saw? How many of y'all been following the story with Prime? I mean, ever since he went up to Colorado, he's made them a ton of money. They've made so much money because he's got this big personality and this big brand, but that comes with a lot of weight and a lot of pressure because they've been just getting their butts kicked. I mean, if you're a football fan, you cannot argue that team has looked good. They just haven't. They haven't looked good for the whole year and however many months he's been there. I know it's still the beginning, but it's kind of surprising. It was a little surprising because he did a really good job when he was at Jackson State. And I know that the folks at that HBCU loved him, and he was winning championships and kicking butt. And then he goes to Colorado, and it's just not the same. And I'm gonna tell you, if you really want to talk about, why Coach Prime is losing, I have a theory on this, and it has nothing to do with football, really, in my opinion. It's not quite well, it has a little bit. Obviously, it connects to football, right? It's kind of a football thing, but I'm not here to talk to you about football. I'm here to talk to you about economics. I'm here to talk to you about black wealth. That's what I talk about. Now, there is a lot of black wealth in football, right? there's a lot of wealth, a lot of black wealth that Colorado is scooping up from the fact that they've got one of the most charismatic individuals in the history of sports running their team. It doesn't matter if they win or lose. They're selling out stadiums. They paid Prime, I think, maybe $5 million a year. He's worth probably at least 50 million a year. They could literally up his contract and pay him 50 million a year, and it would still be a good deal. I would pay him 50 million a year to do what he does, and it ain't got nothing to do with whether they win or lose. I don't care if they win. Right. Just the other day, I was explaining to you all the value of professional sports leagues. We were going through this and how the NFL is now taking private equity money. So the NFL is worth so much more now because money is flooding into these teams now. Private equity is going to boost the valuations. Right now, the Dallas Cowboys are the most expensive team in the league at 11 billion. Jerry Jones is a very wealthy man because he bought that team for a much smaller amount. I want to say he bought it for less than 1/20th of the current price. It was something ridiculous like that. And even the least expensive team in the NFL is, I think, the Cincinnati Bengals, if I'm not mistaken. They're worth about $5 billion. And we talked about this in terms of generational wealth because 60 to 70% of all the NFL athletes are black men. And so they're building wealth on your back, right on your back, right on your son's back. Don't get me wrong, though. Your son's going to get paid a couple nickels. They take care of the players. They pay them well when they're able to keep playing because the average NFL career is only about 2.3 years. And what's unfortunate is that there is some consequences, right? There's a lot of brain damage that comes out of that. I gave a speech once. I was speaking with a guy named Antoine Randall L. Antoine Randall L. Anybody remember him? Anybody remember Antoine? Any football fans in here? Antoine Randall L. I think he was like NFL Man of the Year or something, and he won a Super Bowl. And I asked him. I said, "So tell me, man, this CTE thing they keep talking about. Are a lot of your friends affected by this?" He said, "Oh yeah, man, all my friends, all my friends." He said, like you'll see your friend and he'll say, "What's up? How you doing?" And you haven't seen each other for 4 or 5 years, and then 2 minutes later, he'll see you again and go, "Oh, what's up? How you been, man?" Like just like he forgot that he just saw you, like he can't remember, or you can't, or you'll go downstairs and you forget one of those guys, will be driving to pick their kids up from school and can't remember how to get home. There's a lot of pain, a lot of struggle that comes with that. So, football, I concluded from that conversation, football was very dangerous. As much as I love it, it's very dangerous. And I did not know at that time that a year later, Antoine Randall L., the same guy I was standing next to, was going to be on the cover of USA Today because he basically said, "I wish I had never played football," which was a heavy statement for somebody who won a Super Bowl, right? That's what we grow up and we dream about, right? Little black boys. I don't know if anybody else plays sports. Anybody who else plays sports in here? Give me a yes if you're a former athlete or current athlete. I think I'm not a former athlete. I'm a current athlete. When I go to the gym and I play my hype music, you can't tell me that I'm not playing for the Dallas Cowboys or whatever. When I'm on the court, you can't tell me I'm not Baby Jordan. I'm just like fat Baby Jordan. That's all. But I'm Baby Jordan on the basketball. Anybody else have those little weird fantasies about sports? So ain't no former athletes. There's no such thing as a former athlete. Once an athlete, you are always an athlete. You're always competing. You always want to win. And so anyway, and I actually played basketball in China when I was teaching my finance class in China. I remember the boys invited me to play basketball, and they were so terrible. It made me feel like I literally was Michael Jordan. They didn't even know how to box out. They didn't play defense. They couldn't dribble it. It was terrible. I scored all the points. But anyway, with that being said, with sports, we grow up with these dreams. We have these fantasies. And I can tell you, if you grew up as a kid and you watched Deion Sanders, I mean, you couldn't do better than Prime. Prime was the guy in every area. I mean, this man, he walked it like he talked it. He would tell you how great he was, and he showed it. This man would tell you, "I'm about to run this punt back for a touchdown," and he did it. And I just really admired that about him. I thought that was pretty amazing. And the thing is, though, unfortunately, with sports, just to finish up the part about Antoine Randall L, and then we can, I want to dig into this thing with Coach Prime, and I promise it'll go back to wealth. It's just literally, in case you want to know how this class works, I do stream of consciousness. That's what we do. We just I kind of tell stories and talk about things that are on my mind. And because I've been, studying finance and money for 30 years, it always comes back to the economics. If you talk about sports and black men, you got to talk about the economics because they probably took $1 trillion out of your community from your athletes. Your athletes are like they are an asset to your community, just like gold or diamonds in parts of Africa. In Botswana, the De Beers family goes and they mine all the diamonds and they make themselves rich, but these are Botswana diamonds, right? Or even Letsile Tobogo, who is now the fastest 200-meter dash runner in the world. I think he's the next Usain Bolt, by the way. Look up that guy, Letsile Tobogo. He's in Botswana. That's an asset. He's an asset. He's an international treasure now. They celebrate him like he's Muhammad Ali, and it's amazing. So anyway, when they come in and they're kind of grabbing and cherry picking these black males out of the hood to make billions and billions of dollars, that's just the type of mining. They're mining a resource out of your community. Your big black 6'8", 240-pound ass ain't got no value to them outside of sports or prison, right? It's like if we can't get that Negro on the field, we need to lock him up and make money from him in the penitentiary. That's what it like. If you don't believe me, go ask Ron Artest. Y'all remember when Ron Artest got in the fight at the Palace in Detroit, and he jumped, and the white guy threw a cup and a beer on him or something, and he went up in the stands and got to whooping ass. Well, they issued the biggest punishment in the history of the NBA that day. It was the biggest punishment ever, and they did that because they said we need to we need to basically send a message. We need to send a message. We need to make sure that these people that are almost like they're here for our entertainment. I'm not going to call them circus animals because that's going to sound too harsh. But that's how I think that's how they view some of us. To be honest with you, we need to make sure they understand you don't touch the people in the crowd. You that no, even if they touch you, even if they do something to you, you can't do that. So there's kind of because what the goal is similar to slavery in the sense that not that it's official slavery. I mean, these players make lots of money, so I'm not going to compare them to slavery in that way. But the goal is to say, okay, how do we harness the extraordinary power of the black male? There's nothing like the black male athlete. There's nothing like the black African American male athlete. Like we were on these breeding farms and stuff. So we became almost like a superhuman species because we've survived so much. Think about this. There's no one else in the history of the world who has survived what the African American has gone through. There's nobody else who can say, oh, yeah, we survived the slave dungeons in Ghana where half the people died waiting to just get shipped off. Oh, and then we survived the Middle Passage where half the people died in the Middle Passage. I mean, you're special. Do you know how special you are? And then they say, and by the way, we also survived 250 years of the most brutal slavery in the history of mankind. Oh, and then after that, we survived 100 years of Jim Crow. And then we survived the war on drugs. Then we survived the crack epidemic. Then we survived mass incarceration, right? And here we are still shining. So really, I think that to some extent, we have something that no one else has, right? So it shows itself in a lot of ways. One way it shows itself is with the extraordinary abilities of the black male athlete. Like you can't tell me, y'all, give me a yes or no. Have you ever seen a white version of Shaquille O'Neal? Show me, tell me one guy. Just you got billions of white people on the earth and Asians and there. Show me one white Shaquille. Tell me one guy who was the white Shaquille O'Neal. Give me one guy who was the white Bo Jackson. Anybody remember Bo Jackson? Ran the 40 in like 4.2 seconds. Insanely fast, by the way. That's insanely fast. Strong as an ox. Would catch baseballs and jump in the sky, like Superman. Give me like who's the Asian Michael Jordan? Is there an Asian guy or a white guy? China's got over 1 billion people. India has over 1 billion people. There's got to be one guy who could do what Michael Jordan could do. There's not. There's not. You can't find, and I can keep going down the list. And there's no white or Asian Kobe Bryant. There's no white or Asian or Indian Deion Sanders, right? Deion, and I'm gonna circle back to Coach Prime, and so here's the wealth message here. I want to make sure this is clear, so you don't think we're just talking about football. The wealth message is that extraordinary talent, that extraordinary sacrifice that was made for us to become who we are that is a $1 trillion asset. That's a multi-trillion dollar asset. And if you don't manage your asset, if you don't protect your asset, then somebody's going to come take it. That's what colonizers do. Colonizers be colonizing. That's what colonizers colonize, right? So what does that mean? That means they see what you got and they say, how do I get a piece of that? I'm gonna come in here and get a piece of that. So maybe they'll come in and kill everybody and take your stuff. Maybe they'll come and burn it down. Maybe they'll come in or if they want to be nice, maybe they'll just acquire it. There was an African leader who said that after a revolution in his country, he said, be careful because the colonizers will return, but they're going to show up as investors or as partners Right? But really, they're seeking to figure out how to get control. And in some cultures, they're trained on how to figure out how to control, how to get access to your stuff at an early age. If you're a great rapper and you are NWA in the early 1990s and you've got this new music called gangster rap that everybody loves, well, Jerry Heller comes along and says, wow, I see $1 billion opportunity here. Just sign this contract. I can make all your dreams come true. Just and remember that story in the Ice Cube tells. Ice Cube's come on this platform. He's a friend of mine. I love Ice Cube. He's a great guy. And he put a contract in front of Cube and Dr. Dre and Yellow Boy and MC Ren and whoever the other guy was that I can't remember. Maybe there's another one. And he said, just sign here, and that car out in the driveway is yours. And here's a check for $80,000. And what he was leaning on was that he assumed that a young black male in the hood who doesn't have any money is going to have no financial consciousness whatsoever. He was assuming, like, hey, these are young kids. All they're thinking about is the booty and the bling and the fame. And they're not thinking about what their lives are going to be like when they're 35 years old because they're 18. Who thinks about when you're 18, 35 is like being a million years old. You're not thinking 17 years in the future. I might not live past 21. So why am I going to worry about being 35 years old? That's old people, right? So everybody signed the contract. And I think Ice Cube, to his credit, was the only one who didn't. He was the only one who said, nah, I'm not gonna sell out my whole future just so I can get that thing that's out in the driveway. And that I think is a testament as to why Ice Cube is doing so well right now. That's why I think he owns the big three and he's building this thing that's struggling in the beginning, but over time it's going to become a multi-billion-dollar sports league. And he understands little things like that we've talked about in this class, like how the NFL is worth has teams worth between $5 billion and $11 billion. The number's going up. The number's going up. They make $20 billion a year as a league, and many of these teams could be purchased for as little as $500. Teams like the New York Giants, $500. The Chicago Bears, $100. A lot of these teams were bought for almost nothing, but because somebody took the time and had the vision and the financial consciousness to say we got something here, we can build something here, they were able to turn these into multi-billion-dollar entities. But that required them to have a couple of things that sometimes we lack, which is vision and also self-esteem. If you have vision and self-esteem, those two are like brother and sister. They connect because if I have self-esteem, that means I love myself. I understand the importance of what I'm doing. I have esteem for myself, for anything that's connected to me, my family. That's where the gold is buried. I'm not out running around the world trying to be accepted by other people because I've already accepted myself. So all that validation I might need from the world, I don't need it anymore because I'm getting it from home. Do you understand? If you have a need that you can fill on your own, then you don't have to go out and beg massa for a job to feel like you are important. You don't have to wait for their validation. You don't have to wait for their whether it's their degrees in their schools or them to recognize you by giving you an Oscar or a Grammy. You know who you are. You know how valuable you are, and so you pour into the things that you value, which is you and your family and the people around you. So if you're doing that, you're an entrepreneur and you have a vision and you have esteem about that vision. Then when someone comes along and says, "Hey, Negro, you're very talented. I'd like to offer you a job." You say, "Thank you. I appreciate that. No disrespect, but I got something more important I'm really working on here." And they say, "Well, all that ain't nothing. That's just a raggedy little business. Huh? Why would you do that when you could come work at Google? You could come be a part of Nike. You get to be a part of Ford. You get to go tell your friends that you work at ExxonMobil." And you're like, no, I respect all that. God bless you. But I'm trying to build my own Nike. I'm trying to build my own Google. I'm trying to build my own Ford. It might not work out, but right now, this is the most important thing I can be doing. Do you understand? So self-esteem and vision kind of go together because the vision is kind of what allows you to keep pouring into something even when it's not real. Because you got to find something that's going to occupy your mind and keep you focused so you don't get focused on the booty and the bling and the short-term gratification. Do you understand? People who lean on short-term gratification almost always never have any wealth. People who need something right now, thinking about how much they're going to get paid on Friday, stuff like that. No disrespect, but that's not a wealth mindset. Because remember, you can't pass that job down to your kids. That job, you pour your whole life, all your energy, all the time that could have been spent on your business, it's spent on your job. The time that could have been spent with your kids is spent with your job. The time that could have been spent building legacy you're spending it at that job, and you dedicate your whole life to the damn thing. Then you die at your desk. You just pop over, keel over from a heart attack, and you just die, and they haul your dead ass out of the office because your body's gonna start stinking. Did y'all hear the story? There was a lady that died in her office, and she was in the office for 4 days, and they kept walking by saying, "Why does it stink so bad?" And they found out that her dead body was in the office. Well, when they found her body, you know what they did? They hauled it out. They disinfected the room, they opened the windows to get the smell out, and then they replaced her in a few days, right? So you can't pass that job down to your children. No matter how much you put into that job, you can't pass it to your kids. Your boss can pass it to his kids. So he's like, thank you. You did a great job. You worked really hard for us, and I appreciate it. Now my children will have a wonderful life because of you. Thank you so much, Black people. I appreciate that. Well, I just would say that I appreciate anybody who benefits from the existence of Black people. I don't have anything against them. I'm not anti-white. I don't dislike white folks. I really don't. I don't have time for that. But I want you to also love yourself as much as you love everybody else and pour into yourself as much as you pour into others. And so let's circle back. I promise you I'd come back because I wanted to finish talking about that interesting conversation I had with Antoine Randall L. And I remember when I saw Antoine, I did not even know when I talked to him at that moment. And I was kind of sizing him up, to be honest with you. I told you, there's no such thing as a former athlete. Like even you always have that in your head. And I was standing next to him and we were waiting to go on stage. And I was looking at him and I was like, we're the same height. And I'm bigger than you. If you played in the NFL, I could have played in the NFL too. Damn. Right. So that's what I was really thinking. But then we were just talking, and he told me all about what his friends were going through with CTE. What I did not realize is that he was going through something with CTE too. And that's when I saw the interview a year later, and I said, "Man, I didn't know he was really struggling with that." And he talked about struggling to walk down the steps and all these other things that have kind of happened. And so it just kind of makes me think about the fact that not only is a lot of money being made from our athletes, but what's unfortunate is that a lot of damage is being done, right? Because when that guy's done and he can't play anymore, and he's got this weed and pill addiction, and he's got no money. He's got five babies, mamas he can't pay child support for. They kind of drop him off back in the hood, and then he becomes our person again. Like, right, people start becoming Black again when they realize white people don't want them anymore, right? Like OJ Simpson, he didn't want to be he before the trial, he wasn't Black, he was OJ. When we needed him for the civil rights movement, he wasn't Black, he was OJ, right? When we needed him to do to take advantage of his position with the Bills and with the USC, he wasn't available. But when he suddenly gets accused of murder and he's about to go to prison for the rest of his life, then suddenly he's hanging out in Black churches and he's hanging out with the Nation of Islam and stuff like that. And I kind of think that that's a little bit of an insult. I kind of think it should be okay to be Black all the time, even when you're winning, right? You shouldn't just become Black when you're losing. You should become Black when you're winning. So anyway, let me kind of go into this the next aspect of what I wanted to talk about, because I was really thinking about Coach Prime, but as you know, sometimes stream of consciousness, we go in this direction. And ultimately, we want to talk about our legacy and our wealth and kind of how this all ties together. So let me first off, just a reminder: if you want to be notified when we start class every morning at 10 a.m., pull out your phone, text the word morning, MORNING, to the number 87948. Text morning to 87948. Or you can also go to b1moneytips.com. B, the number one, b1moneytips.com. And you can also sign up there. So b1moneytips.com if you live in another country, or even if you live in the US and you want to go to the website. So here are a couple thoughts on Deion Sanders in particular. This just kind of went through my mind, and I have so much admiration for this guy. I followed his whole career. There's nobody like him. He just was so phenomenal to watch as an athlete. Um, I don't know. Did anybody watch Colorado play the other day? And see how horrible they are. I mean, I'm sorry. This is where people can't figure out if I'm a friend or a foe. I'm neither, and I'm both. Right. So people will hear me say something like, I love Coach Prime, but then I'll say something where they'll be like, oh, you just be hating on Coach Prime. So people either think I love him or they think I'm a hater. I just am a truth teller. I'm gonna be honest. They stunk up the field. They look really bad. Throwing interceptions, missing tackles. Defense was like Swiss cheese. Offensive line couldn't defend the quarterback, couldn't protect the quarterback if their life depended on it. It was really bad. I was watching. I said, "Oh my Lord, these crazy penalties, like just lack of discipline." Yeah, I'm like, "What is this? This is a freaking circus anyway." Like, but yeah, they deal with a lot of hate because they're very flashy and very loud. And when you act like that, when you talk it, you better walk it, right? Because those guys they have egos too. They have pride too. So they're like, okay, you're coming in our house acting like you're better than us. We're going to put you in your place, right? So this is the beginning, in my opinion. I think they're going to have a hard season. And I was thinking about this. I was talking about this with my wife, and I said, I have a theory about why Coach Prime and his team doesn't perform at the level that a lot of us thought that they would. And I said it relates to wealth. Actually, it relates to a wealth concept. And she said, well, what is it? I said, well, when I think about Coach Prime's life, he did do a lot of talking. He could be accused of being arrogant, right? For sure. But it wasn't really arrogance, it was extreme confidence because he had extreme talent. I mean, the man just dominated sports since he was a little boy. And I said, so what's interesting to me is that the players have the arrogance and the attitude, but they ain't got the talent that he got. Right? They don't, because nobody has the talent that he had. Like even Travis Hunter, he's got one guy, Travis Hunter, who's the number one player in his position coming out of high school. But that's very different from being the number one player in your position in college. So even no one on that team is as talented as he. Even his own sons are not of the same talent level, even though they have the genetics. Because when you get married and you have a child, you're blending your genes with someone else. Now, if he did something like Noah Lyles, who's the fastest man on earth, he'll at least based on the 100-meter dash. Now, let's say like Tobogo, got something to say about that. But Noah's incredibly fast, one of the fastest humans in history, and he has a girlfriend that is also extremely fast. And honestly, like the way I kind of think, I'm like, ooh, I hope y'all have a baby. That baby's gonna be so fast because you'll know that like in sports, genetics is very important, especially when you think about how much Dion depended on speed. You can't teach somebody how to run the 40-yard dash in 4.2 seconds. There's no class for that, right? There's only steroids or something. But even with steroids, you can't do it. So if you want to see an example of that, just watch like the men's final of the Olympic 100-meter dash, and I want you to notice that almost every single person in that final is African American or Jamaican or African or if they're European, it's because they recruited an African or a Jamaican to come run for their country. There's almost never a white boy or an Asian guy in that final. There might be one Asian. There's one guy out of 1.2 billion people in China. There's one guy, his last name is Tan or something. There's one guy who might have a chance to make the final. Everybody else is black. That's it. We got the juice in that type of area. So with Coach Prime, I say, these guys, they were given his attitude, but they did not get his talent. So your amount of talking needs to match the amount of ability you have, and I think there's a mismatch. Right? It reminds me, I had a cousin who couldn't fight. He was a little punk. His mama used to spoil him. But every time we got together, it would be a bunch of boys, like 5 or 6 of us. We get together. Every time we got together, this Negro would always pick a fight. We would start playing checkers or something. He'd get mad. He'd flip the board over and he'd be ready to fight. And he would get beat up every time. Like all of us laugh. We're like, why would you keep starting fights if you can't fight? Like if you're gonna start fights, learn how to fight. That doesn't make any sense. So we would just take turns like beating him up and kind of laugh about it. And and I just think that was so illogical. So to me, I think that with Coach Prime's team, what I see is you got guys who think that they're superstars and you're hanging out with Lil Wayne and I'm the man and I'm so important and look at my watch, I'm shining, y'all, and all this other stuff. And they simply can't, they don't have the talent to back it up. So you probably want to be a little more humble, before you start doing all that. The second thing that I would argue is I don't think that I promise you, this is going to get back to wealth. I promise you, this is a generational wealth conversation. I want to make this clear so you don't think we're just talking about football. I just think football is interesting. There's a million different ways to explain concepts. So the second piece is if you listen to Coach Prime and his story coming up, this man struggled. This man struggled. I identify with his story a lot, not just because we're similar in age, and we both, we're Cowboys fans, but also because he talked about his father. I think he said his father and his stepfather were both either drug addicts or alcoholics, or they struggle with substance abuse. And he said, yeah, and he said nobody ever came to any of my games, so I learned early that I had to depend on myself, and that touched me because that was really actually very similar to my experience. This is why I hate drugs so much. I hate drugs. Rich Homie Quan, the rapper, the claiming drugs might have been related to what happened to him. I know he had some drug issues in the past. I hate it. Every time I see a young person die from drugs, I want to go punch somebody in the face because it's preventable, and they do this to our community on purpose because they want to destroy your young people. They want your young black men to be disabled before they even arrive to the game. They literally are doing what Nancy Kerrigan did, or remember what Tanya Harding, well, sorry, Tanya Harding did to Nancy Kerrigan. Remember that where she didn't want to compete against her, so she had a thug meet Nancy Kerrigan in the hallway and bring her like a hammer or something and whack her legs out so Nancy Kerrigan couldn't compete. That's what they do to the young black boys. They get these boys in special ed, they turn them into thugs, they get them hooked on dope so that by the time you're 21, you ain't trying to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, you're trying to get high. You're not trying to go compete with the scientists and the doctors because you are strung out. See, what you don't understand, what they don't tell you is that a lot of these damn drugs destroy brain cells that you're never going to get back. You're never getting those back. You're never. It's like I can't chop off my left leg and then say, "Hey, man, when I was young, dog, I used to want to. I didn't think my legs was important, so I cut my legs off. But now I'm back, man. I went to rehab and I grew my leg back. You ain't growing that shit back, homie. That's not happening. That's not your legs never coming back. That's what happens with some of these drugs. And now they when they slip in the fentanyl in there, you better watch out. I sat on the porch with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about two guys that like to kind of toot a little bit, and but not just the weed, they put the stuff in it. And and they both got in the car, got a little bit high, and they both died in the car together because whatever drugs they got had something in it. And this pisses me off. It angers me because I don't understand how many people have to die before we stop and say, we need a zero tolerance policy in our community when it comes to drugs. It's destroyed too many families. It's destroyed too many young people. It's cost you absolute about $10 trillion in black wealth because a family with drug addicts leading the family is not typically gonna be a successful family. So with that being said, when Coach Prime mentioned that both of his dads had a drug addiction or a substance abuse issue, I'm not gonna say drug. I don't know if it was drugs, alcohol, or both. I said, damn, my biological father was addicted to drugs. He went to prison for drugs. That's why he wasn't in my life. And my stepfather struggled with drugs. He's a soldier though. He came back from it. He walked away from heroin. I don't know how a person does that, but he's a strong man, and I respect that because I inherited some of that. So I felt that, and then when he said that nobody came to any of my football games or my track meets, I said, "Damn, nobody went. Nobody ever came to my stuff either." And it was lonely. I was like, "Dang, yeah, I didn't like that, gang. I was really dedicated to the track team, and I think Mama came to one track meet when I was a freshman. Nobody ever came to anything else for the next 4 years." And so here's what I'm here. But here's the thing. Here's the benefit of the struggle is that the struggle gives you strength. Struggle gives you that extra hunger that keeps you focused. Struggle kind of makes you go the extra mile. Anybody else? How many strugglers we got in the room? I'm not saying that everybody we want everybody to struggle. I don't want our kids to be in pain. But give me a yes if you're in the chat if you would say if you would define your childhood to be a struggle. How many people rose out of the ashes, came out of the mud, rose through the dirt, had the bologna sandwiches with no bologna, right? Had to go through that. Know what that feels like. Um, I know what that feels like, and I'm not going to go into all that. I'll only say that my 16-year-old single mother, they probably wanted her to abort me. I've talked about that, and I do remember living in the projects, and I do remember, you know how you're poor, but you don't know you're poor because everybody else around you is poor, equally poor. So you just kind of think that's how everybody lives, and then you start meeting white people and going to the suburbs, and you're like, damn, I didn't know that you could have all this stuff. Like that was kind of the journey that I had, right? But it wasn't that part wasn't painful because I didn't even know I was poor, right? So I will say this. How many of you would also agree that your struggle gave you a little extra oomph, when it came to being successful? How many of you would agree that when you struggle with something, you're gonna be a little tougher, right? You typically you're kind of ready, you're kind of battle tested, you kind of went through it, like everyone say, "Oh, poor baby, that was so traumatic." My wife does it. My wife's a therapist, and they link everything to trauma, and I'm heavily traumatized. I took the little test called the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. Oh, I'm way up on the trauma scale. So yeah, so she's like, "Oh," she starts to baby me like, "Oh, you poor," but she starts rubbing my little bald head like, "Oh, you went through so much as a baby." I'm like, yeah, it was really hard. It was so difficult. But really, I'm thinking like, shoot, girl, they ain't built like me. I'm ready, right? Like deep down, you're battle tested. You're hungry. You know, I remember the hunger getting me through the long nights of studying in my doctoral program. I remember just like the strength of dealing with the fact that I couldn't pay the rent, and I remember fighting and competing to get what I want. I remember overcoming adversity that could have crushed a lot of people, and that came from the struggle. That just came from the fact that life was not easy, and that's a benefit. Now, here's the thing. Here's the point I want to make. I believe Coach Prime can identify with that as well. But let me ask you a question. You think his sons know about the struggle the way the daddy does? You think Shador knows what it's like to not be able to eat that day? you think you think the other son, Shiloh, you think Shiloh's real fly like his daddy. They got the cool haircuts and they just the big chains. It's inherited. It's awesome to watch. You think they know anything about what their father went through? Like, do you think that they really, I mean, they might know it, but do you think they've ever felt it? Do you think that their father ever made them feel this? And I say this not out of disrespect. I say it because a lot of us are the same way. There's a big part of us where we don't want our kids to go through that struggle. We don't. I don't want my kids to feel the same pain I went through. I don't want them to feel the desperation. I don't want them to feel the loneliness and isolation and sadness that you go through when you're like, damn, like I just need a little help and there's nobody to help me. I can remember times where literally putting an extra $500 in my bank account would have changed my whole life, but I had nobody to give me $500. That hurts. It makes you sad. I was in college my freshman year, and I didn't have any money and I had nowhere to live as a freshman. So I'm already dealing with the stress of figuring out how to get ready for college. I was I was homeless. Excuse my French. I was homeless. And I remember there was this nice lady named Joyce Beatty, and she was helping me, like, help me find a job. Like, I remember trying to go to a job interview at Popeyes to get a job, and they didn't hire me, and I was sad that I didn't get the Popeyes job. They helped me get into a dorm, and I took a job at Hardee's, and I used to work the graveyard shift. And again, as a freshman, college freshman, everybody else is like, "Oh, I hope I can get through science class." I'm dealing with grown up problems at the age of 18. I'm like, "Well, I got to work at Hardee's from midnight to 8 a.m. and then go to class the next day." Like none of my friends were dealing with that. And so it was hard. It made me sad, and I felt kind of hurt, like that, because especially that freshman year, I did really well. I pushed really hard to for the first time in my life, I worked hard on my academics, and I had the highest grade point average of every black student on campus, and I still couldn't get the money that I needed. And I was like, damn, like I'm doing all the right stuff, I'm working really hard, and won't nobody help me with nothing? Like that would that. So I wouldn't want my kids to go through that, right? So I don't blame Dion for making sure Shiloh and Shador don't go through that. But here's the downside though. They're just not going to be built like you, right? They don't have the toughness of you. They don't, so now they don't have the toughness and they don't have the talent that you had, but yet they got the attitude. They got the same confidence and swag and everything else, but confidence. I think confidence. If you look at the line between confidence and arrogance, I think it really just comes down to whether or not you have what it takes to back up what you're saying. Because if you have confidence because you know you can, like for example, I'm very confident about my knowledge of finance because I put in the freaking work. I was the only African American on the entire planet to get a PhD in finance. It took me many, many years to do that. Oh, I can sit with the smartest people on the planet and not feel nervous at all, right? But the confidence is built on substance. It's like I did this. Like if I had not done this, I would not feel this way, right? So, but arrogance is kind of where you're kind of fluffing your way along. It's almost like with almost like a type of emotional inflation where you kind of take credit for doing things that you never actually did. You're acting like like 50 Cent used to say, you say you're a gangster, but you never pop nothing, right? Like you've never really gone through it, but you're acting like you have. You're a studio gangster to some extent. That's what they would call it in hip hop. And so the arrogance to me becomes very dangerous because it's very inflationary. And this happens. I think hip hop culture does this. Hip hop culture does this to a lot of black men. I know a lot of black men who can talk tough, talk a big game, like they got it all going on. They can do this and do that and do this and do that, but ain't really doing nothing because you're not putting in the work. You're not built on nothing, and I can see right through it. I know what that looks like. I know the difference between talk and action because I'm carefully watching how you carry yourself and whether you're a solid individual or not. So I'm gonna just say, when I look at Colorado, the football team, that's what I see. They have Coach Prime's attitude and Coach Prime's confidence, but you have not earned it. You barely beat North Dakota State. You did. You're not Alabama. You're not. You're, the boys in Alabama have a reason to be confident. The guys at Georgia, oh, they can be confident because they have the substance. You ain't got. Y'all don't have it. And here's where I want to link this back to generational wealth is that if you really look at a lot of families that have built wealth, a lot of did y'all know, you probably know this if you've been hanging out with me, 70% of all wealthy families lose all their wealth in one generation. 90% of all wealthy families lose all their wealth in two generations. And the reason they lose their wealth is mainly because all of the work ethic, all of the toughness, all of the struggle, all of the natural, obvious confidence that came from that struggle that the parents had, the kids have none of that. The kids have none of that because you're so busy protecting them from the trauma that you forget to give them the gift of persistence and the gift of endurance and the gift of preparation and the gift of strength and the gift of hard work. They're not built like you. They don't have the same work ethic you had. I don't. You cannot convince me in a billion years that Dion's son Shador is as tough as his father. Shador is in college, living in a freaking mansion, driving a Bentley. Because his dad is famous and he gets to live off of that, he gets to hang out with people like Tom Brady. And Tom Brady, he's a white boy, but he's a tough white boy. He had to come out of the mud in certain ways. He had to really prove himself. When they told Tom Brady about that Bentley, Tom Brady said he needs to stop driving that car and get his ass in the film room, right? And that's something that somebody in our generation would say. We're like, no, you're not putting in the work, dude. This feels good in the moment, but this is not gonna work out for you because you're going out here against real killers that are prepared for that game. And you've been sitting around getting fat and happy in your Bentley. You're just not gonna be prepared for the difficult challenges that lie ahead of you. And so I would say that when you talk about wealth, um, I really think that there has to be a balance. A lot of generational wealth gets lost because when the parent has gone through the mud, gone through the struggle, busted their butt to build all this stuff up for the kids, they sometimes we do the transfer process in a very sloppy way. We will just work our butts off, save up $1 million in stocks and real estate, and then just give it to our 22-year-old son, assuming that he knows what to do with that money. And then next thing you know, he just throws all that money away. He just wastes it all. And it's not just black people. Paris Hilton, the socialite, the reason she would gallivant around and make all this money doing nothing is because her grandfather, Conrad Hilton, was a really tough, hardworking man who grew up in definitely lower middle class struggles and had to fight like hell to get to the top of the hotel game. When he got to the top of the hotel game, he passed that stuff down to his kids and grandkids, and they became these little lazy punk ass socialites. And so really, when I think about the transfer of generational wealth, one of the things I want to do is share this with you so you can kind of think about how you and your family can really kind of have this conversation, right? Like, how do we make sure our children benefit from what we accomplished without just weakening them and spoiling them? And so, if you want to know why a lot of generational wealth gets lost, due to how it's passed to the kids. The research basically shows that there are a few factors that come into play. One is a lack of financial education. So the parents may not always take the time to instill financial literacy into the kids. So your kids, before you think of your wealth like a car. And and if you built a lot of wealth, think of it like a really fancy sports car. And you can drive this car for a while, but when you get done driving the car, you're going to pass it to your child. Well, if you pass this fancy sports car to your child that goes 200 miles an hour, you're probably going to have to make sure you teach your child how to drive. You're going to have to make sure they get their driver's license. You're going to make sure that they pass all the safety tests. You're going to have to make sure that they understand how the damn thing works. Because if you give a car that goes 200 miles an hour to somebody who does not know how to drive, they are going to hit the pedal and crash that sucker into a wall and maybe kill themselves. Passing something as powerful as wealth to a young person who is not prepared to manage that level of power is really like giving them the biggest gun imaginable and taking the chance they're going to point it at their own face. So financial education has to be important. It has to be not just part of your education, it has to be a part of your culture. Culture actually exceeds education in terms of impact. Culture supersedes, it's more important than education. So you have to create a culture of financial education where you're having these conversations with them regularly about economics, how hard it was to get this, what it takes to make it happen, all these other things, expose them to things, bring them in on business deals, talk to them about real estate that you're doing, whatever the case may be. Also, they say that a lot of the wealth gets lost because the parents and the kids have different value systems. We talked about that. Again, they didn't come through what you went through, nor should they have to go through the hell that you might have gone through. But at the same time, they got to go through some type of struggle. And the challenge for you is that you're going to have to figure out how to artificially implement some sort of struggle that's going to help them grow. Next, a failure to communicate wealth intentions. Wells Fargo basically found that 60% of all families don't even communicate their wealth transfer plans effectively. So when you don't communicate, we talked about this yesterday, that you are the leader of that house. You are the king of that castle. You're the queen of the castle. So when the queen, the king, or the leader is not clear in instructions and intentions, then what happens is you're creating a civil war. That whole show, that whole HBO show, House of the Dragon, where you got basically a bunch of ghetto ass white people who are fighting over wealth and power, happened for one reason. It happened for one reason. The king, King Viserys, was not clear on his intentions on who was supposed to inherit the Iron Throne. And because he was not clear about his intentions, that led to the ugliest civil war imaginable, and it ultimately destroyed their family. They basically claimed this was the fall of House Targaryen because they were so powerful that the only way they could destroy themselves was from the inside. And when I saw these ghetto ass white people killing each other left and right over this lack of clarity, I said, damn, that's like black people. Like, we're kind of the same way. The only people qualified and capable and have the ability to take down black people are black people. The only way they've been trying to kill you for 300 or 400 years and it hasn't worked yet. They try to hold you back. They try to destroy you. They try to make sure you ain't never gonna have nothing. But you keep on popping up. They probably look at us like a pack of roaches or something. Like these things won't die. We're trying to kill them. They won't die because we're just tough. We're built like that. But I think, unfortunately, is that we have the ability to destroy each other. And so this is what you see often. You see civil wars pop up all the time, community wide. Like every time there's a freaking election, it drives me crazy. You see all this Crip blood Democrat, red, blue, Democrat, Republican nonsense, where people are fighting over whose political party you're in. Oh, you're voting for Trump. How dare you vote for Trump? He's a terrible person, blah, blah. Oh, you a slave, you on the Democratic Party plantation. I get all that. You can say what you want, but Lord Jesus, I'm sitting here thinking this is so crazy that we're ready. I'm talking about, you got somebody talking about cutting off their own damn cousin because of a politician that doesn't care about either one of you. I don't understand that. I just don't get that. If I'm going to fight you, I'd rather fight you over something that matters, not who's going to win the election. I just don't. I mean, not that it doesn't matter yet, but we survived Republican administration. We survived Democrats. We survived Trump. We survived Biden. I'm not going to fight you about that. That's not interesting to me because I only want to fight over things that really matter in our lives. Like I told you, when I got that stupid, ridiculous phone call from D.L. Hughley where he's yelling and screaming and cussing and making threats, I didn't say a single word. I just sat there and I'm like, I'm not even gonna waste my energy even debating this with you because it's stupid. Vote for whoever you want. I don't care. Like, just shut up. Get out of my face. I got important things to do, like taking care of my family. Like, how about that? I'm a grown man right now. I'm not trying to be anybody's puppet. So you go do your thing. Good luck to you in that. But I'm not doing that. That's not how I'm going to live. So anyway, with that said, let's move on. Let's circle this conversation back so we can make sure we learn something today. Also, they say another reason that a lot of wealthy parents don't pass the wealth to their kids properly is because they say 34% of wealthy parents believe their children are prepared to handle the family's wealth, and they are incorrect in that assessment. So this often leads to poor financial decisions, excessive spending, and bad investments. So generally speaking, when you're talking about passing down your hard-earned wealth and power to your kids, that has to be a very specific, very deliberate, very intentional process. If it's done in a sloppy way, you're gonna lose a whole lot of money. So it's almost like you're grabbing a pot of hot grease off the stove and you're passing this big pot of hot grease, except instead of grease, it's like your wealth. you're passing this big pot of hot grease because the grease, if you cook with grease, don't let's not debate what's healthy and what's not. Let's say it's healthy grease. So if you cook with the grease, you can cook a good, cook some chicken and make all kinds of food with it, right? But if you don't manage the grease properly, if you spill it on yourself, you're gonna be up in the hospital, right? So you're passing this hot grease to your kids, which means you have to be real careful and you have to tell them in advance, like, okay, when I pass you this grease, make sure you keep the mitts on your hands so you don't burn your hands, and make sure you're careful, right? Whatever, right? The peanut oil. Thank you. See, Calvin, you're doing it again. All right. So Calvin always gives me the right word. I need Calvin to hang out with me, just follow me around and just correct my sentences because I'd be messing stuff up. But yeah, so you would first coach them on how to hold the grease, right? And so they don't burn themselves. And you would say, look, be really careful. And you move very slowly, very deliberately. But imagine if you didn't do that. Imagine if you were just like, come here, little Paquan, and you just took the grease and just threw it at him. Here, take this grease, boy. Right? That's what I visualize when I think about passing your wealth to your kids and not being deliberate, intentional, and careful with it. You're throwing hot grease on them, right? So because remember, wealth is powerful in the sense that if you manage it properly, it can make your life so much better and make your life amazing. But if you do it improperly and just use it as an opportunity to create more problems, there are lots of people where they got a lot of money and that was the worst thing that ever happened to them. There are lottery winners who are dead because they won the lottery. Like they died, right? They got the money and they died from a drug overdose, or they got shot and killed because somebody robbed them, or they ended up in jail because of tax fraud, or they ended up making horrible investments and going deep in debt, right? There are people who literally got a blessing, but like my friend D1 likes to say, he always says the devil can bless you too. So you thought you got a blessing from God. You're thinking God, but you're thinking the wrong person. It's Satan who's like, no, 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 I did that. I sent you that blessing. I sent you the booty and the bling and the fame and the fancy cars and the jewels and the diamonds. That was me. That was me. You need to be worshiping me because what ultimately happens, and as you know, with a deal with the devil is it can lead you to a worse place. So with wealth, I think passing that hot peanut oil down, thank you, Calvin, down to the kids. You got to do it carefully. You have to be real deliberate, real intentional, real specific, and that means estate planning. That means trusts and maybe a will, maybe not. You don't always have to have a will, but that means instructions. I mean, talking about what your family represents, what it is that you're trying to maintain, sharing the vision with the kids, letting them understand what you got to go through to build it and to maintain it and everything else. Because if you don't tell them, they'll have no idea. So I'm going to argue, just circling back, the reason I thought that Coach Prime was a good example of this is because I don't think that these guys understand how hard it was for Coach Prime to be as amazing as he was. I think they just enjoy the shine of it all, right? They just enjoy talking crazy and being the man and shining your watch and driving the Bentley and all that, or hanging out with the famous rappers. But they don't understand that if you go back 30 years, back when Dion was doing his thing and he had MC Hammer on the sidelines and everybody was, remember that, too legit to quit, right? And that became kind of a thing in Atlanta for a little while. It became like a big thing. It was because they knew Dion had the juice to back up all of that hoopla, right? He backed it up. He was that kind of a guy. His kids don't have that, right? So I think about that same thing when you talk about any kind of inheritance, whether you're inheriting power, wealth, and talent, or something else. It's all the same idea. So don't just pass down the wealth and the resources. Don't just pass down the results. You want to pass down a little bit of the struggle. You want to pass down a little bit of the process. You want to pass down a little bit of the value system. You want to pass down the vision. You got to pass all that down really to the point where I believe that a child, remember I told you that your children are your multi-million-dollar asset. We don't see ourselves that way because nobody tells us this, but ultimately your children are that asset. Every asset has to be managed. Every asset must be invested in order for it to work. You have to work the asset. If somebody gives you land, somebody has to work the land. So you've been blessed with these things called children. You have to really work on that, like pour into them, whatever that looks like for you, so that they can be built in a certain way. where they're fully prepared to carry the burden of whatever legacy that you've created in your lifetime. Does that make sense? Give me a guess if that makes sense. And the last thing I'll throw in here, just as a little side note, since we're talking about Coach Prime, a man that I admire immensely as an athlete and as a guy, I think he's cool. I like his guy. He's my type of guy in that way. I think he's awesome. But there was another interesting thing that related to wealth in terms of Coach Prime's story. I don't know if you all know this, but you know, in 1997, when he was at the peak of his career, he was depressed. He was very depressed. And because he was so depressed, he drove his car off a cliff. He was literally trying to take his own life because he found that even though he had the money and the fame and the women and everything else, he wasn't fulfilled. And that's another danger that comes with wealth. And like, sometimes your dreams come true, and then you learn all along that you had the wrong dream. A lot of times we dream of the material stuff. We dream of what the celebrity lifestyle or whatever it is. And you get there and you're like, damn, is this all that there is? Is this it? And so because what's happening is every time you buy a car or you go to a party or you get a new house or you go on a fancy vacation, you're giving yourself these little injections of dopamine into your brain. And the thing about dopamine is the dopamine that comes from wealth, it affects the same region of your brain as cocaine. And if you listen to anybody who uses a drug like that, they'll tell you that eventually you get an immunity to the drug. You get to the point where the drug doesn't do anything for you anymore. But in the beginning, it's absolutely euphoric. I talked to my friend, and we were having real conversations, and he talked about one time when he tried that drug. He said, I tried it one time. He said, it scared me. He said, I have never felt that good in my life. He said, I've never felt that good in my life. He said, but it scared me. He said, now I understand how people can't walk away from it and how they can, and eventually they become numb to it. And so really it's the same way with money. You can't look at material things as something that's going to really fulfill you and get you to the promised land. Sure, the material stuff, the financial goals, all that, it is wonderful. I've had money for a while. I like it. Money is fun to have. But there has to be something beyond the money that you're trying to connect to. There has to be something beyond that. There has to be something in your life that you treasure that money cannot buy. You have to. That's the real win. So what money is not a destination. Money is an obstacle you overcome so that you can get to the things that money can't buy. You can go from a stock portfolio to what I refer to as God's portfolio, right? God's portfolio is the only thing you can access when you've gone to that next level where you've pushed the worldly financial concerns to the side and you've been able to elevate into a space of consciousness and connection to all the things that really matter to you. Like you can't tell me that any amount of money is worth more than the love you get from your kids or any amount of money is worth your inner peace and your healing and mental health. There's no amount of money worth your physical health. There's no amount of money worth good relationships with people that you care about. So what I love about Coach Prime's journey as well, and I want to end on this point, is he learned that. He learned that the hard way, unfortunately. He hit rock bottom and then he came back and he said, okay, I get it now. That's when he got into, he became a pastor, I think, and he's got this great family and a connection with his kids that I just admire that so much. And I think that's where he started to realize, okay, this is what wealth really is. It's not that other flashy stuff. Okay. So keep that in mind as you go on this journey. I want you to have all the money in the world, but I want you to have the things that are more important than money. That's the real win at the end of the day. All right. So before I let you go, do me a favor. If you want to get on the text list, text the word morning to 87948. I'll invite you to class tomorrow morning. We do this every single day at 10 a.m. And just text the word morning to 87948. I'm going to try to bring my wife in, who's a therapist. She's done some workbooks on financial anxiety and things like that. If you want to see my wife's work, you can actually go to drboycebooks.com, drboycebooks.com, and she's going to come in tomorrow to talk. I said, the stock market's been kind of acting up a little bit lately, and there's a lot of financial anxiety that can occur as you're watching your portfolio kind of get rocked. So I asked her if she would come in and kind of talk us through ways to kind of deal with that stress and anxiety that we might feel as we're seeing our wealth kind of go up and down, so you can just stay cool and keep making good economic decisions. And then tomorrow afternoon, Dr. Cornell West is supposed to come in, but not to class. He can't make our class time. But what I'll do is I'll send you all a text when I'm speaking with Dr. West. I have a lot of admiration for him. He's a wonderful guy, and so I wanted to bring him in because I just admire him to the ends of the earth. And also, last but not least, the other thing is the All Black National Convention is October 25th through the 27th in Lombard, Illinois, right outside Chicago. So if you'd like to bring your family out, I know you're going to love it. It's like a great big family reunion. Feel free to go to allblacknationalconvention.com. That's allblacknationalconvention.com. All right, guys, have a great day. God bless you. And I hope this was beneficial to you. And I had a really good time. So I'll talk to you.